And I'll tell you a little bit more about my background later in the presentation. Right now, I want to tell you what was the genesis for this event. And we're calling this a continuum event because as I go out and I speak primarily with students,
Keep talking.
okay, speak primarily with students, one of the issues that perennially comes up is, well, you talk about experience and how can I get certain types of experiences? And one of the things that we often will end up touching on, either students will bring it up to me or I will talk about that the fact that I used to be a Peace Corps volunteer and it's where I got a lot of the skill sets that I utilize in the Foreign Service. And so we thought, oh, well, let's pull together a continuum event that covers diplomacy, development, USAID, and then where we gained a lot of those skills, because historically about 10% of the Foreign Service comes from our returned Peace Corps volunteers. So that's the genesis for why we wanted to do what we're calling a continuum event. With that, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Peace Corps. Unfortunately, as Sharina said, Shua could not be here, but I'll stand in. I'll stand in. And let's hope I'm going to do this correctly. Aha, there we go. So Peace Corps, what you primarily need to know about Peace Corps is this. There are three primary goals to Peace Corps. It is for us to go over to countries that we serve in to provide capacity building in that country, so that try and train for the needs that the country itself identifies. Then we're supposed to learn about the culture, the language that's there, and bring that back to the United States. So those are the three goals. To train for the needs in the country, number one. Number two, learn about the culture and the language there. Number three, to bring back what we learn and introduce that to American citizens back in the United States. Why choose Peace Corps? And it's all of what is basically in those first three goals. We go over, we immerse ourselves in the culture and in the language. We do not care so much in Peace Corps about trying to learn to write a language. This is all about communication and interpersonal skills, being able to navigate in an intercultural sphere, utilizing a language that you're in the process of learning, because the first 3 months, actually Peace Corps service is 2 years and 3 months. And the 3 months is because the first 3 months is where you're receiving training in language and culture and some technical training as well, right? But that's where you really are gaining some insights into what your actual talents are, what you're good at, and particularly being able to navigate this environment using your interpersonal communication skills and so forth. And these are attributes that you will find highly useful as you move on in life. There are approximately 240,000 returned Peace Corps volunteers since it was started in the 1960s. Everyone knows the history. It was started by JFK. So I won't go into all of that. If you're interested, what are the qualifications? Generally, I mean, and I can say this too, because so 20 to 86 is the age range of the current volunteers around the world. The oldest volunteer I served with her name was Ray. She was 67, although we did have an 84-year-old in our orientation session, but he didn't make it through his entire service. He was alive. Nothing happened. He just decided that it wasn't going to work for him. So I've actually had experience with that as well. It is true, 95% of the people who join Peace Corps have an undergraduate degree. It is not required. It's typically offset with experience, but overwhelmingly, people do have a degree, an undergraduate degree, and most people are it's still skewed relatively young, but like you see the age range, anywhere from 20 to 86. All right. And then what are the sectors or the areas of concentration once you're a volunteer? There's agriculture, youth development, education, environment, health, community economic development. And I'm going to throw in another one because they've got secondary projects, because this is what happened with me, and I'll go into it later. But this is all about for training for the needs in the country. And so once you're serving and you find there is another need, and you have either the skill sets to fill that need, or you've identified a way to provide that within the community, then you can do that. So while I went over as a water and sanitation a volunteer in Zambia, I ended up doing microfinance because that's what they identified, and I had a business background, and so I ended up doing income generation projects in addition to the water and sanitation projects, because that was the need, was to do income generation projects. Peace Corps is all around the world. Prior to the pandemic, they were in approximately 76 different countries around the world. But then, of course, when the pandemic hit, they all came back. And then now they're ramping up again. But generally, so this map is generally where we have had Peace Corps volunteers, or we have agreements with those countries to have Peace Corps volunteers there. All right, benefits of serving. Yes, that we will give you a living stipend. It is a stipend. This is not like you're getting paid a salary, right? It's just, we say it's equivalent to living on the standards of the local economy. Not true, you're getting paid way more than the local economy in most cases, but it's nothing compared to what you would earn back in the United States. Provide housing, travel benefits, medical and dental coverage while you're there, student loan deferment, and then career skills and training. Safety and health. We do have access to medical care almost in every country that I've ever been in with Peace Corps and know about. There's always medical staff there, or medical staff that we have access to 24/7. So usually you can either make contact with the medical staff, or sometimes we have to go out and come check on you. That happens too. We have security officers, a community immersion training, and then a dedicated victim advocacy. So this is trying to make sure that everyone who serves in Peace Corps is safe. That is a #1 priority when you're serving overseas. Benefits after service, you get approximately $10,000 to reacclimate yourself back into the States. That's more than what I got, and probably more than what Katie got. I think I got like 7,500. No, I think it was 6,000. I got like 6,000. Anyway, you get some money to transition yourself back to the United States. It's, it's not a lot. It helps. It helps. The professional network. I mean, actually, how I got my next job immediately following Peace Corps service was through the network. That's called, I think it was called Hot Jobs at the time. And so I was able to identify a job based on some language skills that I had. And so I went on to work in Japan after that. Federal employment advantages. I won't go into detail now, but you do have what's called non-competitive eligibility. If you have questions about that, we can talk about that. And then I'm going to, along with that, is the Coverdell Fellows Graduate School benefits, and we can talk about that as well. Those are 2 big benefits to serving in Peace Corps. That last one with the fellowship graduate program is where the Coverdell Fellowship either will offset tuition costs, completely pay for tuition costs, provide a scholarship for graduate school, or offset those costs. It just depends on which school you choose as to what level of benefit that you'll receive. And then again, once you return, it's access to affordable health insurance until you kind of get yourself situated and acclimated back into the United States. And then we already talked about public service loan forgiveness. So those are the benefits of serving in Peace Corps. We can talk about applying later, and I do have Shua's information, so I can provide that to you if you have additional questions about how to apply to become a Peace Corps volunteer and go through that process. So I have that information, and we will give that to you later. And then we're going to save questions for the end. So at this point, I want to invite my colleague, Katie Cronin, to come up and talk about USAID and her experience. Katie?
And I don't want to share that with any of my Candy's been joking around with
There we go. And you should. Yeah. Mhm.
Yep. Or is there a presenter mode that I should assume? This just looks like. If I click through here, well, that can be like that.
Yes. Okay. I don't know why you weren't getting that much. Oh, there, it actually did. I have to share it with you as well. That's the issue.
There we go.
There we
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, sorry for the technical difficulties. Before I get started, it would just be helpful for me to know folks in the room who are undergrad versus grad. So if you're undergrad, can you just like wave at me or raise your hand? Okay, cool. And then if you're in graduate school. Okay, awesome. So it's a healthy mix. And I assume for the online folks, it's probably a healthy mix as well. So that's just helpful. Okay, so I'm going to cover AID and also my Peace Corps service and how I got to where I am, I suppose, right now in my career path, which is, still ongoing. I guess I should use the arrows. There we go. There's me. Okay, so my name is Katie. I'm a senior country development officer in the Office of West African Affairs at USAID. My portfolio is pretty large. I cover our Sahel regional office, which is based in Dakar, Mauritania, Chad, the Gambia, Guinea-Bissau, and Cabo Verde. So I'm on the Sahel team. The Office of West African Affairs is a bunch of sub-geographic offices. I'm in West African Affairs, and within West Africa, there's a Sahel team, which is my team, and the coastal team, which is the other team. And then there's an Office of Southern African Affairs, an Office of East African Affairs, and an Office of Sudan and South Sudan. And then North Africa is part of the Middle East and North Africa Bureau at AID. So I've only been at AID for about 2.5 years. I've taken a sort of circuitous approach in my career, and I actually think that's a good thing. And I do a lot of mentorship of students, both from my undergraduate and my graduate program. And that's what I always encourage folks is the journey is important. If you're only focused on the goal, you might actually miss out on a lot of other opportunities along the way that will actually make you a better fit for that position you get down the road. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we move through the presentation. So I'm going to start back in time. My first job out of undergrad, so I did my undergrad at Columbia in New York, and I knew since I was a sophomore in high school that I wanted to join the Peace Corps. I made that decision when I was, when you're a sophomore, you're what, like 15? Something like that. It was 2001, so I feel really old. And we had just invaded Afghanistan. And my AP history teacher was an RPCV from Afghanistan. And he had served in the 60s before the Russians came in. And he came into school fired up after the invasion. And he was like, you need to understand that the Afghan people are amazing and they have history and they have culture. And it's not just a bunch of terrorists who want to blow up the United States. Like he was fired up and passionate. And so we closed our AP history textbook for an entire marking period and we learned about Afghanistan. And he brought in this big steamer trunk that he had from his Peace Corps service. And he showed us his tea sets and his furs and his games and his slides, like the old school slides, like in the little squares that go around in a circle. Like we spent hours and hours on that. We did an experiment where we actually put a student in a full burqa for a day and had her walk around school. We didn't tell her that it was a student from my high school. We pretended that she was someone from Afghanistan here as an exchange program. And we sort of talked about, bias and what does that mean? How do you discriminate? What was her experience being under a burqa for an entire week in a public high school in New Jersey? So I knew when I was 15, I was like, Peace Corps for me. I want to know a place and love a place and understand a culture that's not mine. And that's what I learned from Mr. Greenberg, who is like almost 90, and I still see him every time I go home to New Jersey for a visit. We're still in touch. So I knew Peace Corps was for me. So I did my undergrad, joined Peace Corps, went to Benin. I was there for 2 years and 3 months, as Darian explained. That's how long it is. And it was the best time. It was the most formative thing I've probably ever done in my life. I was a teacher in a middle school in northern Benin in a village called Siraru. And it was the best and the worst 2 years of my life, like all at once. If you have any thought that you might want to be a Peace Corps volunteer, do it. Do it. 100% do it. It's totally worth it. It will change your life. It's wonderful. So I did that. And I was like, great. I know I want to work in international affairs. I'm totally going to go back to the United States. And that's what I'm going to do. And then the 2008 to like 2009 economy crash in the United States, I came back, 0 jobs. I was like an eager beaver. I'm like, I did the Peace Corps. I'm ready to go. I had a great undergraduate education. I'm going to get a great job. Absolutely not. I think I applied to like 60 jobs. I wanted to do like UN work. I wanted to do NGO work. And I wasn't landing anything because any entry-level job was going to grad students who had also done Peace Corps, who also had a graduate degree in an economy that was awful. And so I actually used one of the benefits that Darian spoke about, the 1 year of non-competitive job eligibility that you get as a returned Peace Corps volunteer. And I applied for federal jobs. And I got a job at the National Science Foundation, which is now down in Alexandria. It used to be in Arlington. And I just took the first job I got. I had looked for several months and I didn't want to live in my mother's house in New Jersey. My sister was living in Washington. So I took the first job I got. And it is awful. I hated it. It was in the HR department. If y'all know federal HR, try working in it. It's rough. Kudos to everyone who does. It was hard for me. I hated it. I was there for about 3 months. And then at the time, the chief human capital officer of the National Science Foundation was pulled to help launch what this little organization called the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which was a product of the 2010 Dodd-Frank Act after the financial collapse. It was the organization that was started by Elizabeth Warren and now is she has since moved on, clearly. So my boss's boss's boss was asked to start. And 3 months into the job, I walked into the chief human capital's office and I was like, you're going to take me with you. Here's why. And I laid out my argument and she was like, oh, well, let me get there first. Like, we'll see. 2 weeks later, I was at the CFPB and I wound up being at the CFPB for 4 years. And it got to the point in my career where I was like, wow, I'm either going to stay here and like, I'm going to be a bank regulator, apparently, not at all my goal, or I'm going to go and chase that dream, for lack of a better term, of doing something in international relations. So I went back to school at night full time while working for the CFPB full time during the day to get my MPA. And I did that at GW. And then once I finished that in 2014, I quit the CFPB and I took a job at an NGO called TechnoServe. They used to be downtown. Now they're in Arlington, in Crystal City. And I worked there for a couple of years, just getting my feet wet. From there, I moved to another NGO called ACDI VOCA, which is down by Union Station, worked there for a couple of years. Then I was recruited from Save the Children for their Tanzania country office. I moved to Tanzania with my family for 2 years. And the pandemic hit. Things got a little hairy. So I wound up leaving sooner than I wanted. I stayed for 2 years. I was supposed to stay for a third, but for a variety of reasons, my family and I chose to leave. And that's when I started at AID 2.5 years ago. So you can see it's a little bit of a journey. And actually, one thing that's worth pointing out, when I was quitting CFPB, my original plan was to become a foreign service officer at the State Department, just like Darian. I had taken the exam, I had passed the orals, I made the register, I got the call, I got the offer. the whole deal. And then I met a guy. And I got the offer. I just started dating. I mean, it's true. This is what happens in life. And we're going to get to like the flexibility that you learn from Peace Corps service. We had just started dating and he was really great. And I was like, oh, let me defer, because you can defer for a year once you get your State Department offer. And by the time my deferral came up, we were engaged. And then we had to have that really awkward conversation, like, so would you be a trailing spouse? Like, would this work? Like, would we do that? And he was really honest. And it's a hard conversation, but you have to think about this if you want to be a foreign service officer, whether it's with the State Department or USAID. And he was like, no, I can't do that. And so I made the very difficult decision to turn down my offer at the State Department, the job I thought I wanted, that I'd worked so hard for. And I went the NGO route and then found my way to AID. For me, that was the right decision. I feel like it's a lot harder to find someone you're compatible with to live your life with than it is to find a job that makes you happy. So I chose that. That may not be your choice if you're ever faced with it, but that's where I went. So enough about me. Let's talk about AID. Does everyone know what USAID stands for? United States Agency for International Development. So this is our mission statement. Y'all can read it. It's what we do. It was started in 1961, the same year that the Peace Corps was founded. So it's a pretty new organization when you compare it to the State Department, which is a whole heck of a lot older. It's gone through a whole lot of different permutations. I think this is a helpful slide, at least for recent history for Peace Corps. Under the Clinton administration, things at headquarters were reorganized. Under the Bush administration actually did a whole lot for foreign affairs and international development. That's where the Millennium Challenge Corporation came out of. It's where the president's emergency plan for AIDS relief, PEPFAR, came out of. There was actually a really good, I think, Nicholas Kristof article in the New York Times about PEPFAR a couple of weeks ago. That was worth the read. That came out of the Bush administration. Then under Obama, it was reorganized again. Some sort of very technical things happened, which you can read in the timeline. Under the Trump administration, that's when the sort of language around self-reliance, journey to self-reliance started happening. And then in 2020, under the Samantha Power administratorship for the Biden administration, we celebrated our 60th birthday. And then she's been pushing very hard. Some of you probably know about this inclusive development agenda and localization, been pushing really hard. The other big change that's not on this slide, which we'll talk about in a little bit, that's changed with Administrator Power, is that the United States Agency for International Development now has a full seat at the National Security Council. That is new. It used to be that State Department invited us, like, hey, AID, there's something relevant, why don't you come? But we didn't actually have a say. And what Administrator Power did when she accepted the administratorship, I guess that's the word, I'm going to use that word. When she became the administrator, she's like, no. Full seat at the table. And so there's been a huge shift at AID because now we have a massive NSC workload. It's a big difference. So we are at an equal seat, if you will, from the National Security Council perspective as State Department. And that's a really big shift that's happened in the past few years. So what we do, here are all of the sectors. We work in basically everything development related, as well as humanitarian assistance. That's a point of confusion for a lot of people. Folks don't realize that there actually is a very bright line between foreign assistance and humanitarian assistance. How it's delivered, what it does is completely different. But AID does both. There's a whole separate bureau for humanitarian affairs within USAID that handles humanitarian assistance. That's like disaster response. There's a flood. There's, famine. That's BHA's work. And the rest is administered through all of the other bureaus at USAID. Our team, a lot of the world, as you can see. The Sahel, where I work, is over here. So we're in a lot of places. It's a really big bureaucracy. This is the org chart. It's really big and kind of confusing. I would say that the important thing to remember is that there's things called the geographic bureaus, which is where I am, right? That's like Africa, Middle East, South America, Asia, Europe, and Eurasia. And then there's the pillar bureaus, which are more of like the technical bureaus. And then there's all the support, like IT, management, those sorts of bureaus. So it's a really big place. All this to say there's lots of different opportunities depending upon what you're looking to do. Are you a technical person who's really into health and really into education? There's an office for that. Are you a geographic person? You really love Africa like I do. There's an office for that. Or are you more of a management person, right? And you're into operations. You want to learn contracting. You're into HR. Love you for it. All right. So there's all sorts of things you can do at AID. Career paths, which you might be interested in. So these are the two traditional ones at AID. You got your civil service and you got your foreign service. I'm a civil service officer. We also have foreign service officers. And this is something I didn't know when I was an undergrad, that there was actually a foreign service that's different than State Department foreign service. It was like news to me when I learned this, 15 years ago. And they are posted in embassies overseas, just like the State Department, but they work for USAID, implementing USAID programs. There's a separate mission, usually a USAID mission, which is co-located within embassies. In places where we don't have full missions, we might have offices, in which case there's like a couple of people who have a couple of desks in like a corner of the embassy. But there are both options. The process for getting into the USAID Foreign Service, I would say, is probably equally competitive, but less burdensome. Is that fair? I'm looking at Darian. You don't have to sit for a test. You don't have to go for like the same like process of the orals and things. You apply through USA Jobs, you get invited to interview. It's that route to go to foreign service. So if you're interested, go to USA Jobs. They periodically open foreign service officer opportunities for AID. Civil service jobs also posted on USA Jobs. And those are your Washington-based officers like myself. But we get to travel a lot, so that's fun. So depending upon what your personal lifestyle goals are, whether you want to be in the US or overseas, that's something to consider. There are also ways, one thing that's pretty cool, I think the State Department does this too. Once you're a civil service officer at AID, you can do what's an excursion tour where you're temporarily converted to the foreign service to take a tour overseas for hard to fill positions. And then you come back, they hold your job for you in Washington. So that's kind of cool too. We'll probably do that when my youngest daughter's a little bit older. In addition to that, there are these opportunities at USAID, which are equally important to know about. You have your personal service contractors. So those will be posted on USAID's website usually. It's like they need a person with a particular skill set, either in Washington or overseas. And it's basically an individual contractual agreement between you and the United States Agency for International Development. You're hired as a contractor. So you don't get the benefits of a civil service job or a foreign service job, but it is a job. It's usually time limited for a certain number of years plus several option years, depending upon what it is you're talking about. Then there's institutional support contractors. So USAID regularly bids out large contracts, usually support contracts, to contractors primarily in the DC area, but anywhere. And they are the ones who put out the job opportunities on their websites. You get hired by the contractor, but you actually work at USAID. These are really great opportunities for folks who are new to the workforce. So possibly if you're right out of undergrad, that's a great place to look. Because they're less competitive than getting a full civil service job. You can get your feet wet at AID and make connections so that like when a civil service job opens, you know about them and like know more how to apply and everything. They're generally administrative support type functions, but it's a great way to get your foot in the door at AID. And then there's fellowships. There's a whole bunch listed here. You probably have heard about many of these. I know we have some paid fellows who've come from American. PMFs, the Presidential Management Fellows Program, is a really popular one. You get lots of PMFs from the schools in the DC area as well. So these are all ways that you could come to AID. And then I think this is my last slide. Yeah. Skills for success. I get a lot of questions from folks that I mentor and have mentored over the years. Like, what do I need to do? Like, what are you looking for when you hire? I've hired a lot of people. On the soft skills side, flexibility and adaptability. And hopefully from my intro, when you're a Peace Corps volunteer, you have to be flexible and adaptable. Like you have to learn that. That's a real asset, not just for the employer, but also for yourself, right? Like that's a good thing to be. If you're really rigid and can't kind of see silver linings and see opportunities or see windows where doors have closed, you know, it's a struggle if you can't build that sort of resilience in yourself. Interpersonal skills, cultural sensitivity is a big one. You have to be able to work with people who look different than you, who believe different than you, who, you know, speak different languages than you name it. It's really important. Networking and building relationships, hugely important. Curiosity I put on here, I also think is really important. You know, just a natural curiosity about why do these people do it that way? Why was that decision made? It's important. And humor, particularly on the development side, and I'm sure Darian will agree on the diplomacy side. Some days are really dark, really, really dark. I mean, we deal with some really awful things. I was telling Darian I was really looking forward to this because my week's been kind of depressing with what's going on in Sudan, because I cover Chad, which shares a 1,000-mile border with Sudan. It's something that's on my mind that I'm dealing with. And it can get really dark. So having humor, really good, so that you don't burn out. On the hard skills side, real world experience, I meet a lot of early career individuals. And in some cases, they happen to be young. I don't know what's, can you say young people anymore? I don't really know, but I'm trying to be politically correct. People who are early in their career being like, how I want to do international development, or I want to do foreign affairs. You need to be able to demonstrate that it's not just an idea, right? And you can do that in a lot of ways. You can volunteer with diaspora organizations in the US. If you can't travel, you can become a Peace Corps volunteer, which y'all should do it. You can get internships, you can get paid jobs. There's lots of ways to demonstrate your commitment to a career in this field. And that's really important. I put writing in all caps because I think it's just so important. If you don't know how to write and communicate clearly in writing, it's really hard. And I am that person when I'm the hiring manager for doing a writing test. If there's grammatical errors and things, like automatically no. So it's important. And if you have to do a writing test for a job, use the spell checker. Do it. Use the spell checker. You'd be surprised how many people don't. Research skills, super important. Data analysis, data synthesis, really important. I can't tell you how many people that I interview. I'm like, hey, do you know how to run a pivot table in Excel? And you might be like, oh my God, I don't know how to run a pivot table in Excel, but learn it. It's actually really important. And then if you are taking, you know, economics, econometrics, learning SAS, learning SPSS, all that stuff can be really helpful. And then foreign language skills, also really helpful if you want to get into this field. Doesn't matter what language it is, but demonstrating that you have the aptitude to learn another language, also really important. So that's everything I've prepared. I'm going to turn it back over to Darian. Thanks.
All right. All right. Well, hello again. This time I'm going to talk a little bit about myself and also related to Peace Corps, and then talk about the State Department. So a little bit about me. And I'm horrible with the slides. I always forget that the slides are there. So forgive me if I'm a little bit behind, because normally I will typically roam, but I'll have to stay here. So like Katie, I also had a very circuitous route before I actually decided upon my final career. So I think it is illustrative to go through that a little bit too. So despite getting my undergraduate degree in political science and business, and that was the 5-year plan, wasn't supposed to be. It was a 4-year plan to get my degree in business. I started, didn't like it, switched to political science. Then it was like, well, it's too far down the business. Now to get an interdisciplinary degree. My parents are like, when are you graduating? I'm like, don't worry, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. So 5 years later, it does. So, and despite that, my first job out of university was as an educator. So I taught American history and the prep courses for the PSAT and SAT because I got headhunted coming out of college because they wanted male teachers to work in inner city schools. And so I did that. Love the kids, parents, not so much. So about, I'll spare you the story, but it was one encounter with a parent that I was like, this is not for me. So I ended up joining the Peace Corps after that. I finished out my academic year, joined the Peace Corps, was there. It was a tough first 2 years. And like I said, it's 2 years, 3 months in the first 2 years, but this is where my story really begins, because this is where I started to learn about leadership. I had a really tough time in Peace Corps the first 2 years, but I am a strong advocate for Peace Corps because of this. So it was, everyone struggles in Peace Corps. As Katie said, you're going to have, it's a wonderful experience while culminated with, wow, this is really the toughest job you'll ever love, right? So first 2 years, and then the new country director comes in and he's like, Darian, I want you to stay a 3rd year. I want you to become a volunteer leader. And I'm like, you're out of your mind. I'm not doing that. I'm out. I've done my service. I'm out. And I was like, we're done talking. And he's like, wait, hold on. He's like, no, I really think that you would be good at this. I want you to stay for a 3rd year. And I said, you have no idea what I've been through. I'm out. And to his credit, he had read my file. He did. And he started recounting, oh, I know about this. 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 And it still took him 2 weeks to convince me. And ultimately what I said was, you know what? Because you do know, because you paid attention, yes, I'll stay. And God, I'm glad I did. The 3rd year was phenomenal. By that time, I was good at the language. I understood the culture. I had a network. I was able to get stuff done. I was able to help the volunteers settle in, network. And it was true. All the things I had gone through, I was a great advisor. I'm like, oh yeah, I've been through that. Let me tell you about this, okay? But I also met a foreign service officer while I was serving in Peace Corps, and he got to know me after a while, and he's like, hey, Darian, you really should think about becoming a foreign service officer. And I said, 2 questions for you. First of all, what's a foreign service officer? And second of all, what do you do? So he explained that. I was still young, full of vim and vigor, and he did nothing more than plant a seed because I didn't really take it that seriously at the time. He planted a seed, so fast forward 4 years later, I'm now working in Japan, and I'm thinking, I was thinking about getting married, and not unlike Katie's story, and I was like, well, her parents would probably like for me to have a career, so maybe I ought to get one. So I was thinking back on like, well, I always kind of knew I wanted a career in international affairs, but I didn't know what. I really didn't. So I thought back over everything, and that's when the seed that he had planted germinated. And I was like, oh, well, let me do that. I'll take the test. So I took the test, passed, went to the oral examination, failed. And then I'm the kind of person that, like I told you from previous, like my time in Peace Corps, it's okay for me to decide I want to do a thing, but I really dislike when someone tells me I can't do a thing. So out of principle, I had to retake the test. So I was like, retook the test, passed. And then this time I did a little consulting before I went to the orals, and finally I passed the orals, and that was my entry into the Foreign Service. I have now been in for almost 21 years. It'll be this summer, 21 years, and I'm now a senior foreign service officer, having served, if you'll look at the flags at the top of the slide, having served in Malaysia, India, Afghanistan, Australia, Indonesia, and Germany. And then this is my second time here in Washington, DC. The first decision point, and Katie brought this up in her slide, that you have to make about joining the State Department is whether or not you want to join the civil service or the foreign service. If you want to primarily have your career domestically, then you're thinking about the civil service, and we have jobs there as well. If you're thinking that you want to spend the bulk of your career overseas, then you're talking about the foreign service. And I'll talk about what the process is to entry into the foreign service. But for now, I want to talk about how we try and facilitate entry into the service. Our biggest issue, I'm still surprised of the number of people, the number of Americans who still don't know about the State Department, don't know what we do. Specifically, they don't know what the Foreign Service is. And so we've created a number of programs over time to help people become aware of this. One of the ways we do this is through the student programs that we have. It is now a paid internship program. It used to be if you had a friend over in France and you're like, oh, well, hey, I have a friend over there, they can take care of housing, and then we would do a background investigation on you. And if you pass the background investigation, then you get to be an intern. We've now figured out that's not the best way to hire interns, right? And it was an unpaid program. So that also disadvantaged people who need to be paid. So now it is a paid program. We pay you at a GS4, which is about $18+ an hour. We pay for your, if we send you overseas for the internship, we pay for your flights overseas, we pay for your housing. If you're doing it domestically and you're coming from outside the DC area, we will also provide accommodations as well as pay your salary. All right, so we have absolutely leveled the playing field. Please also, if you're thinking about an internship with the department, do not think about it in terms of the skill sets that you're bringing to the table. We've actually reversed this. We have, when you're applying, there's going to be 26 different skill sets that you're going to choose from. And what you're choosing is the skill set that you would like to develop. And it could be anything. It could be economics, it could be political affairs, it could be cyberspace technology. There's 26 of them. And so you choose where you would like to be professionally developed. And then we match you with an office. Where it becomes competitive is you need to be explicit about why you want to do this and why we should choose you, right? Fellowships. Fellowships is another way that we facilitate entry in. These are opportunities for you to go to graduate school where we will offset the cost of you going to graduate school. And there are the two premier flagship programs that we have are the Pickering and the Wrangell. They're primarily the same in that it's for 2 years of graduate school. We'll pay up to $42,000 a year to offset the cost of you going to graduate school. During the summers while you're in graduate school, you will intern with us. Once domestically, once overseas. Now, what's the primary difference between these two programs? The Wrangell program was started by Congressman Wrangell. And so your domestic internship will be at Congress. That's the primary difference between these two. All right. And then our two newest programs, and one of them is not on here, is the Foreign Affairs Information Technology Fellowship. So if you had an IT degree, computer science degree, those are also a fellowship that is offered. And then we also have one if you were thinking about becoming a diplomatic security agent, we also have a fellowship to help facilitate that as well. On the civil service side, there's now the Colin L. Powell fellowship, and that is for if you're thinking about the civil service, that's a way to help facilitate entry into the civil service. As I said before, I'm not going to go into great detail about this. If you're thinking about the civil service, just know that you spend the bulk of your career, if not all of it, in Washington, D.C. or somewhere domestic. Benefits are the same, so I'm not going to go through that. Foreign service, as I said, is you're spending your time overseas. Here's the thing that I like to talk about, and I'm not good at math. This is why I switched from business. But here's something to think about when you're trying to do your calculations about, what's good for me, what would really work for me. So let's do this hypothetically. Hypothetically, let's say that we're paying you $100,000 a year. Know that we rank order every city around the world from 0 to 35. 0 means the environment is equivalent to living in Washington, D.C. And then you have places that at 20, let's say, for example, that would be Mumbai, India, Jakarta, Indonesia. That's a 20. At that, there's two things there. One, the 20 is what your plus up in pay becomes just because you choose to go to a place like that you're willing to serve in a place like that. Second, at that 20%, if you do have student loans, you can participate in our student loan repayment program. And that's where we'll pay up to $10,000 per year, up to $10,000 per year to pay off your student loans. So long as you're serving at a post of 20 or higher, you can participate in that program and we'll pay up to $10,000. So you get your $20,000 of extra pay, $10,000 towards your student loans. Your total package there is $130,000. But wait, when you're serving overseas, you don't pay for housing. And I'm sure that's your biggest expense when you're back here in the United States. It typically is for most people. And by the way, when you're serving overseas, we cover housing and we also pay for utilities. If you have a car, we ship over your car. We also pay to send your kids to school if you have children. And we also pay for the flights and so forth for your children. Your children and your family, we don't make you leave them behind. They get to come with you too. So it's just something to think about. I always try to tell people, think about the total package. This is a way that you can sock away money. In my case, I spent my first 13 years back to back overseas. So then when I was able to come back, I was able to just buy my house and be done with it. All right. At this point, now, Katie, please join me back up here because now we're going to answer your questions. And anything is open. We will answer any questions that you have.
All right. Thank you so much, Darren and Katie. I am just going to do a few things. First, we're going to stop recording. If we could have that happen really quick, and then I'm going to stop share. All right. And we have a good hour of time.